The Cusumano brothers are back. This is the Money Stop, your most important NASCAR betting stop of the day. He's Cole Cusumano, I'm Steven Cusumano, and the Money Stop presented by Kicking the Tires. Splash and go, Cole, right into it. Tyler Reddick back to a winner in 2024 at Talladega. Phenomenal finish. It really looked like there was a point coming off turn 4 that this was going to be Michael McDowell, Noah Gragson, Brad Keselowski. But lo and behold, Tyler Reddick had the best run coming off of a very aggressive block from McDowell. Took out those other 3 drivers, including himself. And this was Tyler Reddick's race to win. So this was just, the only way to put it is that this was classic Talladega.
Oh, 1,000%. And it's I guess you would have never known it at the time, but that one pit cycle, which wound up being the Money Stop, where all the Toyotas blended on track, and there was an incident with Bubba Wallace, John Hunter Nemechek, Eric Jones, which, by the way, wish him best of luck getting back in the car. He suffered a spinal injury following that wreck, so get well soon, Eric. But who would have known that would be the race for the win, in that Tyler Reddick was leading that charge for that Toyota line and wound up winning the race. So really big day for that organization. Big day for the sport in general. Seeing Michael Jordan at the racetrack finally for a win with the Jordan brand on the car, this has incredible potential to bring the sport to new heights. And I think it already opened NASCAR to the eyes of a lot of different viewers. Having done this, you saw guys like Magic Johnson reaching out to MJ on this historic and really awesome win. But just in regards to Tyler Reddick, really important for them to get this win. Whenever we go to these speedways, I feel like he's not someone I think of whenever we go there, just because he's always wrecking out of these races. The speed's been there, don't get me wrong, especially when he was with Childress, but just a matter of closing them out, and finally he got it done. And by the way, our very first episode this season, one of the props that we liked as a long-term bet, penny stocks, was Reddick to get 2 wins this season or more, and that value was plus 250. So if you jumped on that, you are 1 away from cashing out already in the 11th race of the season, which we're going into. So really solid race. I felt gutted for Brad Keselowski again. I mean, how many times can this guy finish runner-up and not get the win with his new team as a driver and co-owner? This was his 5th runner-up since he got his last win. And it was heartbreaking for me, just seeing he threw that first block, McDowell, come into the start-finish line, then threw the next block, and obviously got into the 6, and that caused Reddick to win. But overall, solid race. I think we're kind of to a point now where we were back when we had tandem racing at speedways, and it wasn't the best product. Saw a lot of riding around, saving gas, and I'm kind of split on this. On one hand, I like having those fuel mileage races, but at the same time, I don't think that should come into play at a place like Talladega or Daytona. So I think something has to be done with this new package for the speedways. But overall, solid race. We got what we look for in a crazy finish and a really memorable win with MJ and Reddick. So can't complain too much. Fun Talladega race, and looking forward to Dover.
It definitely was memorable. And I think, I can't remember who pointed it out. It may have been Harvick on the broadcast, said that the way Reddick won that race was almost the exact same way that Brad Keselowski won his first race. But it was just, like you said, Cole, heartbreaking. Knowing the storylines of what was at stake for Brad, and he was my pick to win the race. I felt really good about Brad winning the race. It just felt tough to see that stripped away from him on a really aggressive block there. But as is the case with Talladega, it's never going to be a perfect week from a DFS or betting perspective. I will say we did have 4 drivers out of the top 10, and the 4 drivers that are there, there were 2 more so favorites in Brad Keselowski and William Byron, but there were 2 value picks, one that you picked and then one that I picked, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who finished 4th, Todd Gilliland, who finished 8th, and then while he was not officially one of the drivers we discussed, I think I did talk about Noah Gragson as my sleeper for the win, just kind of as off a whim, off a gut feeling at the end of the episode. So my 2 drivers finished 2nd and 3rd last week. But again, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was a guy that I mentioned the volatility. He's either going to be top 5 or bottom 5, basically. And your pick of Todd Gilliland was another really good one. So, when you talk about 12 drivers, there's certainly going to be a lot of things that go wrong for those 12 drivers at a place like Talladega. But considering the drivers that we did predict that did finish in the top 10, was pretty impressed by our analysis. While the daily fantasy lineups were kind of sunk by some guys involved in accidents like Bubba Wallace, and I can't remember who was in your lineup, but
Eric Jones. We both had Eric Jones, so that was a big hit.
Yep. But rolling through this top 10, Cole, Tyler Reddick, the winner. Brad K, the runner-up. Noah Gragson came dangerously close to winning. He wound up third. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. fourth. Alex Bowman fifth. Anthony Alfredo with a career-best drive in sixth. Byron seventh. Gilliland eighth. Daniel Hemrick in ninth. And then Harrison Burton rounded out the top 10. So I agree with everything you said, Cole. I think this was not the best Talladega race from start to finish. It was a great, classic, typical finish, but it was a memorable race in the sense that, like, when you look back on Talladega from spring of 2024, you're going to think about Jordan Brand in Victory Lane and Michael Jordan being there and holding Tyler Reddick's kid while he's watching him do burnouts in front of the start-finish line. It's just one of those things, like you said, that is really good for the sport. And that was speaking of that car, I thought that was a dime, to be sure. We've moved our nickel or dime segment to social media to where we rate the paint schemes, 5s out of 10s or nickels, 10s out of 10s or dimes, going with our money theme. That one is one that I think the both of us would have picked as a dime. And I don't know if you have any more input on the the cars rather, for last week at Talladega or this week at Dover, but I got to give a dime for sure to the HendrickCars.com 5 that they just rolled out for Throwback Week for Kyle Larson.
That is an incredible paint scheme, a great throwback. I think it's one that fans have been wanting for a long time, and Kyle himself said that it's probably going to be his favorite car he's ever driven on track, and it looks great. So I'm really pumped up for a Throwback Weekend, as we always are. But no, I did want to say, though, I am ramping things up actually on the graphic front for the money stop. I know I've been slacking on the nickel or dime side of things, but I will be bringing that back next week. I wanted to bring it back this past week at Talladega because we had that really awesome Wendy's paint scheme from SVG, and obviously the Wendy's car from last year won our Silver Dollar Award. So we're bringing it back this week next week, and I'll be doing a Throwback Thursday graphic for the paint schemes we missed, starting with the Daytona 500. So we're going to get double the paint schemes to look over and kind of dissect, give our nickels or dimes, and looking forward to Dover, though. It's going to be a really good weekend, I think.
This has always been, obviously, one of my favorite tracks, growing up a diehard Jimmy Johnson fan and seeing him win here 11 times. It's a track I love to watch. I would love to go to very soon. But we're going to have this race on Sunday. Starting lineup for it will be determined at 11:20 Eastern Time on Saturday. So, Cole, as we take it to the bank and check out the odds per Vegas this week, the favorites per BetMGM, pre-qualifying, you've got a heavy favorite this week, and that is Kyle Larson, who's plus 375 for the win. So a pretty big step up from the next driver, Martin Truex Jr., who's plus 650. Ross Chastain is plus 700, and then co-favorites at the fourth highest odds are Denny Hamlin and William Byron, both at plus 800. So seems like a pretty fitting favorites category, Cole. I think that maybe that's a little bit of a steep price for Kyle Larson, but why don't you kick us off? Because I think when I think of these concrete tracks in the next-gen car era, there's one guy I probably think of, and it's Martin Truex Jr.
1,000%. I mean, he's a Jersey guy. He's got 4 wins here. His brother, Ryan Truex, got a win here last year in the Xfinity Series. It's a Truex town now that Jimmy's not, racing full-time in NASCAR. But, I love Martin Truex Jr. at Dover on these concrete tracks. Again, plus 650 for the win, second favorite for the win, and $11,300 for DFS. So a really steep price, but there is good reason for that. He is coming off an 11th place day at Talladega, which was much needed after back-to-back lackluster races. I mentioned last week how Talladega could be a clean slate for some drivers. Well, I think they're just keeping momentum rolling for that 19 team because they've been one of the best teams all season, most consistent teams all season, and that's made evident by their 10th place average finish, which is tied for the best in the series with William Byron. And just speaking on Dover, he won the most recent race there, again, to become the winningest active driver there with 4. It was the site of his first win in 2007, and he stood the test of time since, obviously winning as recent as 2023. So looking at his stats as a whole from Dover, 11.4 average is third best overall, nearly 1,100 laps led is second best overall, and that is through 33 starts. So again, just has been unrelenting at this track, one of the best drivers to ever hit that surface, and look forward to seeing him have a really good day once again on Sunday. But I also mentioned the other driver who's been the best in the series this season in terms of consistency, and that's going to be William Byron, who's also our winningest driver, obviously, with 3 this year. He is again tied for the 4th best odds at plus 800 for the race win and $11,000 for DFS. So I think one thing you're seeing, at least through these first 2 drivers I mentioned, is that William Byron is the cheapest of those 2 at $11,000. He is the, I believe, 3rd least expensive in this favorites tier, and that's a trend we've seen the last 2 years, where he's been pretty much one of the most dominant drivers in the garage area, but he enters every single week as probably the best value for DFS from that favorites tier, so keep that in mind. He picked up his series best 7th top 10 at Talladega this past weekend, so much like Truex, keeping the momentum rolling. Once again, tied for the best average finish this year at 10th place. Also riding a 5-race top 7 streak in the Cup Series, so he has just been unstoppable in my opinion to this point. And in reference to Dover, he's finished 4th there in 3 of his last 4 starts, including last year with most laps led, so he's definitely been one of the better drivers at that track. I would say, along with Truex, it's been the Hendrick stable as a whole that's been the best at Dover in recent years.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially on the topic of William Byron. Like, he should be a favorite basically every single week, and out of the favorites, he seems to just be always the best value in that bracket for the most part. But co-odds with him, Cole, at plus 800, you've got Denny Hamlin, who is 10,800 in daily fantasy, so he is a little bit cheaper than Willie B if you decided to go with a Toyota instead. But Denny had a tough break at Talladega, but he has fared well at Dover in his career. He has only 1 win there, which was in 2020, but he's led nearly 700 laps at Dover and has top 10s in just under half his starts. Speed as of late there especially, but a 16.1 average finish in a very extended sample size. And again, a very recent win right before the next-gen era in 2020. Finished 5th there last year and has top 7s in 4 of his last 6 starts. 406 laps led in that span. So Denny is a guy that, I don't know if I like him as much as the other guys in this favorites category, Cole, but he's definitely one that is a very safe pick, it feels like. I would be shocked if Denny does not finish in the top 5 this week and run up front, because he's just been one of the most consistent drivers in the garage this year, and he's had speed at Dover. So outside of that, how do we not end this favorites category with the favorite of all favorites, Kyle Larson, plus 375. He is the most expensive DFS driver at 11,500, and he has been dominant at Dover throughout his career, despite the fact he's only got 1 win there, and it came right before he joined Hendrick Motorsports at Chip Ganassi Racing in 2019. So if he won in Chip Ganassi Racing, he's due for a win here in Hendrick equipment, as he has 3 runner-ups overall, 73% top 10 rate at Dover, and an 8.6 average finish, which is dragged down by a 32nd place finish at Dover last year. He has led nearly 900 laps in 15 starts, only the 1 win to show for it. 4 races where he's led over 130 laps at Dover. I mentioned the 32nd place finish last year. He also finished 6th at the track, so it feels like it's time for Kyle Larson to win at Dover. Like, you just look through those numbers, and it's shocking to you he hasn't won at Dover in the 5-car, partially because, like you mentioned, the dominance from a guy like Martin Truex Jr. in this next-gen era at the concrete tracks. But I think Kyle Larson has definitely established himself on a week-to-week basis that he's going to be a contender, and especially at a track that he already has great success at. So I feel very confidently that Kyle Larson is going to have another strong day, probably lead the most laps in this race. So you've got Larson, Hamlin, Truex, and Byron as our 4 favorites this week in that category.
Yeah, and I agree with all of what you just said on both those drivers. I think Denny's probably my least favorite of the favorites. Yeah. However, you look at the stats as a whole, they're not like pretty, they're definitely respectable. But you look at his recent speed, those 406 laps led compared to his 700 total, or near 700 total, like, he's led most all of his laps in these last 6 races. He's got 4 top 7s in the last 6 races, 5th last year, so he's had the recency for sure at Dover, and the win back in 2020. So I do think he's a really good pick. Kyle Larson, like you said, week-to-week basis, going to be a contender for the win. Just those stats are absurd with the 3 runner-ups, 73% top 10 rate, and the series best 8.6 average in 15 starts. So love both those drivers. But I'm looking at the sleepers category, and I think this is where we potentially could see our winner. These are all 4 legitimate sleepers, and I think the first guy I thought of when making this outline, mainly because I spoke to him yesterday, was Alex Bowman. And Alex Bowman is someone he is very, very vocal about how Dover is for sure his best track. He loves that this is a track where he, as a driver, can make a difference. And he's seen the benefits of that in recent years since joining HMS at Dover, the Monster Mile. He's plus 1,600 for the race win and $9,300 for DFS. His top 5 at Talladega was his 4th of the season, which actually tied his total from 2023. He's also top 10 in the standings, but that's not enough for him. He told me he is dead set on getting a win with his 48 crew. He sees Byron winning races. Chase Elliott's got to win. Kyle Larson's got to win. He wants a piece of that cake too. And I think that he very well could get it here at the Monster Mile. 5 top 5s over his last 6 starts at Dover, going back to 2019. That includes that top 4 day for Hendrick Motorsports back in 2021 where he beat Kyle Larson. Keep in mind, though, he did miss the race last year. So some teams in the garage, most of them have one more start with the next-gen car at Dover, which he thinks might be a bit of a challenge. But at the same time, this is a track where he told me he expects to win, and if not win, to run top 5. And I think when you look at his stats, 5 top 5s over his last 6 starts with only 1 outlier, there's good reason for that. And I think he's extremely confident going into this one. The only thing that he did tell me was that he does have half of his team is pretty much brand new this year. It's guys from within the organization, but guys that have not worked together at the cup level. And it's been a bit of an adjustment period for him. But when you consider that he has as many top 5s as he had last year through 32 races, he has 5 top 10s through 10 starts, and that's with 3 speedways. I think he's had a really solid season. I think he knows that he has to step up and be on par with his other teammates. And this is a great track where he can do that, and I think he will do that at Dover. And the next guy I'm looking at is the runner-up man since getting that last win 2 years ago. Brad Keselowski, plus 2,000 for the race win and $7,700 for DFS, which I will call disrespectful. Those are value pick values right there at $7,700. Just sickening when you consider this guy has back-to-back second-place finishes in the Cup Series, and coming off the heartbreak at Talladega, he's very, very hungry to get a win. At Dover, he's got 1 win back in his championship winning season in 2012. Has a 12.9 average finish, which is the 4th best overall, and he finished 8th last year at Dover after qualifying 4th, so he does have speed here, and he did have a 10th place average running position in this race last year, so definitely someone who has speed at Dover in his career. Maybe not like prominent speed, but he has run up front. He ran up front as recent as last year, and I think that just having that momentum on your side of scoring those back-to-back runner-up finishes, it's going to amount to a win at some point. I don't know if it's going to come at Dover, but I think he's due for a top 10 day for sure.
Agreed. Brad is going to be a pick that I feel pretty comfortable with every week. I'm a gotta see it to believe it kind of guy, and I've used that expression a lot when discussing Chase Elliott. I mentioned that I'm not going to put a lot of stock into Chase Elliott until I see that first win after the accident last year. I see the speed week to week, and we have seen the speed every single week from Chase Elliott, culminating with the win a couple of weeks ago at Texas. He had a solid top 15 day at Talladega. Chase this week is a pretty solid value, which is why he is a sleeper technically. Plus 1,100 in the sleepers category, 9,900 in daily fantasy. He won the first next-gen race at Dover, finished 11th here last year in what was a very down season, and he's got nearly a 70% top 5 rate at Dover with 9 top 5s in 13 starts, which is pretty absurd, and he has the second best average finish at this track of 9.8 in 13 starts. So I think Cole, when I think of Dover, of course you think of Jimmy Johnson, but secondarily to that, I just think of how great the speed has always been for Hendrick Motorsports at Dover. Time, generation through generation, year through year. The Hendrick Chevys are also always fast. We've mentioned all 4 of them now, which is why I feel very confidently in picking Chase Elliott as a sleeper this week. Another guy I'm trusting with some good numbers at Dover after a 13th place finish last week at Talladega is Ross Chastain. He was valued at the 3rd highest odds per Vegas, so they feel pretty good about him, and you probably should too, as he's valued at 10,200 in daily fantasy. Finished 13th at Talladega, like I mentioned, but best finish over his last 4 races was that one. So it's been a little bit of a rough go of it as far as the results go. However, the speed has been there, and for Ross Chastain, it's been there at Dover as well. In the next gen era, he's finished third and second at Dover with 184 laps led. That is the most in the next gen era at Dover. So all this talk about Truex and the Hendrick Chevys, Ross Chastain almost gets swept under the rug in the sense that he has performed very, very well here. And he's a driver that I would say he's near the back of those. I feel good about Truex, Larson, Chase, Byron, those guys we mentioned. Ross is certainly a sleeper because he's at the back of this tier of 8 drivers that we just mentioned. But I do feel really good about Chastain.
Yeah, I do too. And, I struggle to put him in this category, but at the same time, he doesn't have a win this season yet. He's kind of struggled as of late. And I just think, like you said, you got to see it to believe it. I want to see him close these races out. Obviously, he's done that at Dover in the next-gen era. But, I was thinking about it. I was kind of going between him and Christopher Bell. Bell's got 2 top 10s here at Dover as well. But I just couldn't pass up on those numbers from Ross Chastain. And realistically, I couldn't really call Bell a sleeper, seeing as he already has a win this season. He's been one of the best cars all season, so went with Ross Chastain there. But moving on to value picks now, I think we've got some really, really good deep dives here. And the 2 that I'm looking at are 2 drivers who we actually picked on our show last week for Talladega. And one had a really good finish. One had a kind of subpar climactic finish. I'll call it Talladega. But I'll begin with Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who is $6,500 in DFS. He finished a season-best 4th at Talladega, and he's going into Dover with a runner-up and a 15th-place finish in the next-gen era, so really, really encouraging numbers. And also want to note that 2 of his 4 top 10s at Dover in his career have come in his last 5 starts here. So he's definitely had recent speed at Dover, and I like to believe that the results from Talladega and the speed from Talladega will transfer over to this race at Dover. And the other driver I'm kind of going to pick on here is Corey LaJoie, who is our cheapest driver in the value picks category at $5,600, coming off a wild 18th place day at Talladega where he finished the race on his side, face-to-face with his teammate Carson Hocevar. And no matter how you look at it, I know it wasn't the day you want from Corey LaJoie at a place like Talladega where you expect him to run top 5, top 10, and contend for the win. But still, it's a borderline top 15 day. It's something to build off of. It's stacking pennies. And I look for Dover to be a race where he can capitalize on a really respectable outing. Because you look at what he did here in the next gen, coming off back-to-back career best top 20s at this track in the next gen car, finished 8th in 2022 and 14th last year. So really, really respectable numbers. Again, I think these are 2 drivers who are going to capitalize off some really decent days at Talladega. And I think they're both really good values this week that are, not in that $7,000 range. But Steven, I want to ask you one thing for your value picks. We mentioned all the Hendrick guys. We talked a little bit about Jimmy Johnson, his dominance here. Obviously, Jimmy's making his first start at Dover since 2020 when he retired from full-time racing. And he is Mr. Dover. He's basically Miles the Monster at this point. Mentioned the 11 wins. He struggled mightily in the next-gen car. But I really want to get your thoughts as a diehard Jimmy Johnson fan on his, expectations for this week. Do you think he could be a good value pick?
I think he could be a good value pick. I think here's the deal with Jimmy is he's had rough luck with the next-gen car in the sense that he just hasn't gotten the laps under his belt that are necessary to learn the car and learn how to drive it. But the good news is he did get that at Texas. He finished the race. He wound up finishing 28th and 29th in his 2 races this year. But again, most importantly, he's got some laps under his belt. So he's comfortable with the car, but now he goes to the track he's most comfortable in. I don't know that I would expect more than, I don't know that you could expect a top 10 or a win from Jimmy, but at plus 10,000 for a guy who's won at this track 11 times and is very much still competitive. I think that's the other thing too, is Jimmy is not content with running out there and just finishing last every race that he comes out in a limited schedule. He wants to, especially after finishing the race last time, running on the lead lap for a good chunk of it. I think that was at Texas, one of his better tracks, but Dover is his best track. It's, you're talking about the site of his last win, number 83, which was now, 7 years ago. And 3rd place finish there back in 2020, which was, like you said, his last season. So I think I'm factoring some confidence in the fact that it's Dover, number one, obviously, and then number two, he learned some things. He discussed with the media some things that he learned about driving the next-gen car, about things that he would have been able to do in the old car, but he can't do in this one. So he's learned. It's always a learning curve. It's a learning process. I think I would probably stay away at 6,200 for DFS just because he hasn't had any good results in the next-gen car. But a flyer out there at plus 10,000 for the race win for Jimmy, for the guy that's won more races at this track by far than anyone. And he is also to finish in the top 10 plus 325, kind of a steep price. But it's still Jimmy. It's still Jimmy Johnson. It's still Dover. There are probably better value picks, but I like Jimmy this week. I also like Chris Buescher. You mentioned two guys that were red hot. Stenhouse and LaJoie were two of our value picks last week. I think actually they were my two value picks last week. Well, Chris Buescher was a guy that slipped under the radar a little bit. He's plus 2,200 for the win this week, 8,000 in daily fantasy, and he has top 10s in both of his next-gen starts with laps led at Dover. He is one of three drivers who can say that, and his only top 10 and laps led came at Dover. So Chris Buescher, a guy, he's another one I kind of think of when we go to these shorter concrete tracks like Dover. And at that value, 2,200 plus 2,200 is really, really good for, a top 10 prop bet, top 5 prop bet. And we've seen him win several races last year as well. So I feel pretty good about that value for Chris Buescher. And then, again, at plus 10,000, which I think that line's actually moved on Jimmy. He's plus 12,500 for the win. So just since starting this episode, that line has moved on the 11-time race winner at this track. He's tied with actually Ricky Stenhouse Jr. per BetMGM now on those odds. So I feel good about those value picks, Cole. Well, Cole, let's get this set of 12 drivers down to 6. We're each going to pick one from our favorites and sleepers and values. So why don't you kick us off?
Awesome. I'm going to go with Martin Truex Jr. for my favorite, Alex Bowman for my sleeper, and then Ricky Stenhouse Jr. for my value pick.
I will go with the Hendrick Motorsports All-Star team. Kyle Larson as the favorite. I will take Chase Elliott from the sleepers, and I will take Jimmy Johnson as the value pick. How about big money bets, though, Cole? These are our favorite prop bets of the week, where I mentioned there could be some risk involved with picking somebody like Kyle Larson at plus 375 for the win. But at minus 130 for a top 5, you can feel pretty damn good about throwing several units on a bet like that. So we like to go with top 5s, top 10s. Favorite prop bets of the week are our big money bets that you can feel comfortable throwing a little bit more money on. So, Cole, I'll kick it off. There's a couple I really like this week, and that's the Hendrick Chevys in the top 5. I like William Byron at plus 140, Chase Elliott at plus 170. Those are probably my two favorite big money bets. And then if you go a little bit deeper down on the list, you've got Alex Bowman at plus 250, which I feel obviously less about. But again, you spoke to him. You said all the things that needed to be said about Bowman, I should say. But plus 250 is very good odds there. And even, I know it's less than even money, but minus 130 for Kyle Larson at a top 5 seems like a surefire bet. And then lastly, Cole, Brad Keselowski in the top 10, plus 110. We're talking about a guy that's finished runner-up the last 2 weeks. And, those are very solid big money bets that I honestly feel pretty good about this week.
Yeah, you named a few of mine that I actually had written down. The first one I'm going to go with is probably the one I feel most confident in, and that's going to be Keselowski to finish top 10 at plus 110. Again, riding those back-to-back runner-up finishes. Finished 8th here last year, had an average running position inside the top 10, qualified 4th, and I just think that he's been the best Ford in the field this season so far, even better than Ryan Blaney, in my opinion, in terms of consistency and whatnot. So I like that one quite a bit as a big money bet. I also like the two Hendrick ones that you mentioned, Alex Bowman top 5 plus 250, Chase Elliott top 5 plus 170. I mean, Chase Elliott, he's got 9 top 5s here in 13 starts. That's just ridiculous. It almost seems like a lock. I like Chase Elliott a lot this week. Alex Bowman, like you said, I mean, you want to see a little bit more from that team, but 5 top 5s in his last 6 starts, as well as the win, that's really encouraging, and as well as his confidence saying it's his best track by far. So I like Bowman as well. And for one more, I'll name Ross Chastain top 5 plus 130, seeing as he finished 2nd and 3rd here in the next gen with most laps led combined. So those would be my 4 big money bets.
Let's talk some head-to-head parlayable bets here, Cole, because there are some pretty decent ones this week. I'm just going to run them down, and let's see which one you what direction you take this. But there are 5 listed on BetMGM. You got Tyler Reddick versus Kyle Busch. You've got Alex Bowman versus Ross Chastain, Larson versus Elliott, Hamlin versus Bell, and then Keselowski versus Buescher. So these are a collection of head-to-head bets, Cole, that feature a good amount of drivers we have discussed, which implies we have confidence in them, and a good amount of drivers that we have not discussed. Not to say that, they couldn't outdo the other, but we've been very successful this year in the 12 drivers that we mention on this episode, that they tend to be guys that finish in the top 10. So this is a pretty interesting week for the parlayable bets.
It is. And I'm going to be honest with you, I wouldn't really advocate any of these. The one that I kind of like over the rest is Bell over Hamlin at plus 120. However, we mentioned Hamlin's recency here at Dover. I mentioned briefly Bell has 2 top 10s here at Dover in the next gen, one of only 3 drivers. So it's a bit of a toss-up, but I think just given the season as a whole, I was going to say Bell, but at the same time, I feel like when he's not finishing races in the top 5, top 10, he's crashing out. So, you know what? I don't think I like any of these this week. But just to give some more context, Reddick versus Busch. Busch, great history here. Reddick coming off the win. I don't think both have really been great at Dover recently. Bowman versus Chastain. Those are both guys that have run top 5 at Dover recently as well. But they're 2 drivers who are looking for a win this season, looking for more consistency. So it's a bit of a toss-up. Larson versus Elliott, also a toss-up. You like to say that Larson has the upper hand, but they've also had their misfortunes this season. And then Keselowski versus Buescher. 2 very similar drivers. Keselowski only has the 1 top 10 here. Buescher has 2 top 10s here. Keselowski riding the back-to-back runner-up finishes. So a lot of 50-50 matchups here, and I personally would not go for any of them.
Yeah, the one I kind of did like was Brad over Buescher, only because, the back-to-back top 2s do not lie. And he's been the best Ford, and he's been carrying the flag for that bunch. I really just feel that there's something to be said for that. But those are the head-to-head match bets. Let's talk about our DFS lineup, Cole. We collaborate on a DFS lineup every week, except last week. When it comes to super speedways, we each pick our own DFS lineup. And I'm proud to say that my DFS lineup at Talladega outperformed yours, but that neither of our lineups were in the money, unfortunately, because of what we mentioned at the top of the show. Eric Jones, Bubba Wallace sank my lineup, but I did have Brad in that lineup, and that was what carried the flag for me. So this week, we collaborated on a lineup once again, and it features all drivers that we have discussed on this episode, and it is very Hendrick heavy. Leads off with William Byron at $11,000, followed by Chase Elliott, $9,900, Alex Bowman, $9,300. So you got the 3 Hendrick Chevys leading it off. You've got Brad at $7,700, which is just too good a value to pass up for all the reasons we just mentioned. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., great at Dover, $6,500. And finally, as you mentioned before, Corey LaJoie, one of the very underrated tracks on his ledger. He's a great value at $5,600 in DFS, as you mentioned previously. So that is a daily fantasy lineup, Cole, that I feel pretty good about.
I do too, and this was a pretty difficult week, honestly, for DFS, just because the gap is so tight between the top drivers. And so how I went about this one was I pretty much plugged in Alex Bowman automatically at $9,300. I love his value. I love his confidence. I think he's going to have a really good race here at Dover. Definitely a top 10 day. I'll throw that out there right now. I also went with Brad Keselowski as well as a lock, just going off the momentum. He had the speed here in the last race. I like that a lot. And then from there, it was a little difficult because, you look at the top drivers, and like I said, it's the gap is weird. So you could have chose between a few drivers. For the second most expensive in Chase Elliott, it was between Chase Elliott and Ross Chastain. Ross Chastain was $300 more expensive than Chase Elliott. I know that he has the second and third place finishes, but I like what I've seen from Chase Elliott more this year. Better value. And then for the ace in our hole, William Byron. This was a bit of a tough one too because you could have went with Bell or Hamlin, and I feel pretty good about all 3 of those drivers, Byron, Bell, and Hamlin. So it's kind of preference at that point. And as you mentioned, Hendrick has had the number from pretty much every other driver and team at this track outside of Truex at Dover. So We went with the 3 Hendrick Chevys for the top of the order. And then for the value picks, Stenhouse and LaJoie, I think they're worth looking at just because the momentum from Talladega with Stenhouse in the 4th place finish, season best finish, had the runner-up, had the top 15 in the next gen at Dover. And Corey LaJoie, respectable day at Talladega and 2 top 15s at Dover in the next gen is pretty impressive. So I think it's a well-rounded lineup. I'm excited to see how it does because I think it has a lot of potential.
I got to be honest, Cole. I can't help but get like a gut feeling this week. Like, it was 3 years ago at Dover. Hendrick Motorsports finished 1, 2, 3, 4 with Alex Bowman winning. This year at Martinsville, Hendrick Motorsports had the first ever 1, 2, 3 finish in Martinsville history. I get a very similar vibe this week. I just like where that team is at. I like William Byron. I like where Chase Elliott's at. You talked a lot about Alex Bowman and Kyle Larson, obviously. There's nothing else that needs to be said. I really, really feel this is going to be a Hendrick Motorsports dominated race. And look, it's not far-fetched to say that because they've done it at Dover before in the next gen era, and they've done it this year at a short track. So that's kind of where my head is at this week. I just really like the Hendrick Chevys. And on that note, Cole, let's put our money where our mouth is by giving you our official race winner and sleeper bets. These sometimes are gut calls. Sometimes there's a lot of logic involved. But for me, this is a very easy pick this week. I think Chase Elliott's going to go out there and win at Dover this week. I feel that, I mentioned it before. I said that Chase Elliott is a guy that I am not putting any penny stocks in until I see the results. And we have seen it now several weeks in a row, majority of the season. And this is my first time picking Chase Elliott for a win this year. And I think that he is fully back. And once again, I think that, you think back to Texas, riding the confidence from that into Dover, Texas was the last non-super speedway, of course, that we were at. I think a Hendrick Chevy will win this race. Matter of fact, I'm going to see if there's any props on that. But I will take Chase Elliott for the win this week.
Yeah, I like that a lot, too. He was definitely one of my favorites. I'm going to go with the Hendrick Chevy as well. I love what you said about obviously they had the 1, 2, 3, 4 here, but they had the 1, 2, 3 at Martinsville as recent as, like 3 weeks ago. So I kind of get that same feeling as well. I think it's going to be a Hendrick Chevy, and I'm going to go with Kyle Larson for the race win here. I think he'll score his second win at Dover in the Cup Series, first with Hendrick Motorsports. Those numbers are just way, way, way too good to pass up on. 73% top 10 rate, 8.6 average finish, all those laps led. I definitely love Kyle Larson this week. I do think it's going to be either him or Chase Elliott that winds up in victory lane. And for a sleeper, we're looking at Tyler Reddick and down in the odds per bet MGM. That is the 15th and lower. Wow, this is like a lot of interesting names over here. I'm going to go with Josh Berry, someone who we had not mentioned, but he did finish top 10 here, right in the number 48 when Bowman was injured last year. And he's a very good short track guy. He ran well at Bristol, which is also a concrete track. So I think that will translate to a really positive day for that number 4 team at Dover.
Yeah, Barry's a really good pick. I'm glad you brought him up because he's plus 5,000 for the race win and 1,200 for a top 3 finish. And if we hadn't picked Jimmy Johnson as my value pick, I think it probably would have been Josh Berry. But I am going to take Jimmy as my sleeper. That is no surprise. I will take the all-time winningest driver at Dover as my sleeper at this track this week. So it's going to be a fun one, Cole. I love Dover. I know you mentioned it before. This is a track that I love a lot. I know you like it too. This race will take place at 2 o'clock, 400 laps at the Monster Mile, 2 o'clock Sunday, April 28th on Fox Sports 1. Cannot wait to see it. Any parting words for us, Cole?
I want to get your thoughts on a favorite memory or maybe 2 memories from Dover, because I know you have a lot of really, really good ones from this track. For me personally, being a Dale Jr. fan, there wasn't a lot to brag about on track, but I just love the whole vibe of Dover. I love that it's all concrete. I love Miles the Monster. I cannot wait to get out there and see him one of these days. It's probably, I want to say, like the top 3 track for me to visit, just because it looks so fun. I think the racing culture in that area of the state is also really big. But for me, outside of just the whole vibe and the atmosphere of Dover and what it looks like, I think the 2 memorable ones for me have to be the wreck from Joey Logano, the barrel roll back in 2009. That was one of my earliest NASCAR memories, actually, because we got into the sport around that time, and that was one of, if not the worst wreck we'd probably seen at that point. So that one's always stuck with me. And then there was the Xfinity race in 2011 where Clint Boyer almost flipped coming to the start-finish line for the checkered flag. He was like on his side and made contact with the inside wall. I think Austin Dillon was also involved, Carl Edwards, but those are two that stick out to me. I know you've got probably quite a few with that number 48 in your mind.
Yeah, there's a lot that come flooding back. I feel like in hindsight right now, it didn't feel like it would be so significant at the time, but I really do remember Jimmy's last win very well in 2017. It's definitely a remember where you were when it happened type of feeling. Just kind of seeing, growing up a Jimmy Johnson fan, you know that he was a huge supporter of Cale Yarborough. That was his favorite driver growing up, and when he tied Cale with his 83rd win, I knew that was such a big one. He had the tribute helmet, and you could see how much it meant to him in victory lane. And that 83rd win in 2017 is definitely one that comes to mind. But out of the other 10 besides that, I would say the most memorable had to have been 2012 when he was rocking the bright blue Madagascar car with the rainbow circus afro in victory lane. There's so many. Obviously, again, there's outside of that last one, there's 10 to go off of. So I don't know how you could look at the other 10 and not think of that one as the most memorable. It was a fun race. I think he beat out maybe Kyle Busch for the win. But just seeing that really cool, vibrant Madagascar car with the circus afro was in victory lane was iconic. And I remember I had the die cast for it too. And that's just one that it sticks out when you think of the 11 wins there. That's one of the first ones I think of.
Yeah, and I was going to say that was the one that I had in my mind, actually. I wanted to make sure that it was the Madagascar car, but yeah, that was so iconic. That paint scheme, the rainbow, the circus afro, really fun race, really fun win.
There's another one, Cole, that I actually we weren't watching the sport when this happened, but it was the year Jimmy won his first championship, 2006. I see the memory come up on social media every year. That phenomenal save that he had, I think it was during qualifying, where he kept the car off of the wall in 2006 when he spun out during qualifying, and you just see Jeff Gordon's phenomenal reaction to that happening. I think that's such a funny thing to see overall, but just the fact that it happened at Dover kind of almost signaled what a phenomenal career Jimmy was going to have at this track. It's just one, again, I wasn't watching the sport for, but I think that's such a cool memory for people who probably have watched longer than us.
Yeah, and actually in that same air, for me as a Dale Jr. fan, one of my favorite sports moments of all time is when the sport came back after 9/11 and Dale Jr. won at Dover. The scenes from that win looked unbelievable, and I really wish that I was watching the sport at that time, and at the track specifically, because like I said, it just looked unmatched, that the atmosphere, the electricity following that win, waving the American flag out of the car at Dover. So I agree with you on that one as well.
Yeah, there's so many moments. We got into the sport a good time, 2008, but there's so many moments that make me wish we were fans earlier during that time frame. But obviously, we were 3 and 4 years old at that point. So, so this is the Worth 400 at Dover Motor Speedway, one of my favorite tracks of all time. Can't wait to see Jimmy hit the track, as well as the rest of the crew. And once again, it'll be a 2 o'clock green flag on Fox Sports 1. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We will drop the jack on the most important NASCAR betting stop of the day. For Cole, I'm Steven, and we'll see you guys next week.